examples that were given of Uber, you didn't see government legislating that people can't ride in taxis anymore. And with Airbnb, you don't see government legislating that people can no longer stay in hotels. So this bill is detached from the reality that oil and gas are, and coal, but obviously oil and gas are the backbone of our energy industry. The Energy Information Administration of the federal government is predicting and projecting that in the year 2050, we will still be getting 68% of our energy from oil and gas. That'll be up 2% from the year 2030, where we'll get 66%. And so even with renewables, we're still going to need a lot of oil and gas going into the future. We ask you to oppose the bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Come on up.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, my name is Tony Smith. I'm the CEO of Secure Futures. And it's not often that I'm inspired by a piece of legislation, quite honestly. And so I stand here in opposition to the opposition and applaud Delegate Rasul for this visionary and bold piece of legislation. We're no longer at a time where we can afford business as usual. And I'm old enough to remember John Kennedy's challenge to this country in 1963 when he said, let's land a man on the moon within 10 years. Had he said, let's land a man on the moon sometime, it would have happened. He gave our country 10 years to make it happen, and lo and behold, we did it. So I would suggest to you that this piece of legislation is both inspiring and practical. And we've seen it happen. We just completed a 1.3 megawatt tracker array for Carillion Medical Center near Christiansburg with solar storage, energy storage. What inspired the management of Carillion to want to move in this direction was that they too are well aware of El Derecho. When their hospital visits spiked 8%, when households in their community were without power for 10 days. And it was because of the El Derecho event that they committed themselves to a sustainable, resilient strategy. So it can happen, and I would urge the committee to vote in support of this bill. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, David Clark representing the Virginia Oil and Gas Association. We do oppose this bill, and I just want to highlight one aspect of this. The bill says that there would be a moratorium on any exploration for fossil fuels. For those of you, chairman and chairman who are from Southwest Virginia, you know very well that there are hundreds and thousands of jobs in that area and elsewhere in the state that are dependent upon the natural gas industry and the exploration and production of gas there. So we would ask that you, among the other reasons suggested here, that you oppose this, because this would be an anti-jobs bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Delegate Hugo. And I appreciate it. And I think Delegate Rasul and I think all of us up here are looking to get to the same end game and pursue that same goal. The gentleman who spoke, I guess two prior, spoke about we can't afford to wait. And I think as we think these things through, and like I said, I applaud what you're trying to do. I think we also have to remember that some people can't afford a lot. Some of us represent an affluent district. You don't break a sweat thinking about paying the electric bill every month. But some people, if you jack the costs up, you add $100 to their electric bill, or 20 to 50 or whatever it may be, and you add that over 12 months, that's a lot of money to a lot of folks. And so like I said, I applaud what you're trying to do, but the gentleman said you can't afford to wait. And I think we also need to remember that some people can't afford to pay their bills at the end of the month. And we've got to be very careful as we pursue some of this incredibly laudable goals.
Thank you.
Delegate Russell, you have a quick summation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Delegate Hugo, for those thoughts. I think we're all trying to head in that direction. My friend Scott, who spoke earlier in opposition, did dub the bill the final solution, and I think that there was a reason why. It's quite high-reaching. The only thing I'll just mention, Mr. Chairman, is 20 years ago it cost us $1 billion to map the human genome. It cost us $10,000 legislation that's out there so we can actually save people a whole lot of money. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Delegate Rasul. Committee operates by motion.
Move to report. Second.
Move to report, properly seconded.
Substitute motion to PBI.
Second.
Motion by Delegate Branson, properly seconded to pass by indefinitely. Members wishing to vote, please go on the electronic voting board. Clerk will close the roll. House Bill 1490 passed by indefinitely 6-3.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Delegate Rasul. Delegate Boulevard. House Bill 1273.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I've got a substitute that's distributed.
Corey is about snacks if anyone's interested in them. Delegate Ward, I apologize. So we have an amendment in the nature of a substitute to House Bill 1273. Can we go it? Substitute's been moved and seconded. All those in favor of adopting the substitute, signify by saying aye. Thank you. The substitute is now before us, Delegate.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. This is House Bill 1273, which is the Alternative Energy and Coastal Protection Act, and I want to be mindful of your time, because I know you all have been up there for a long while, and I also know that you had a chance to hear earlier Delegate Poindexter's bill, and not to go ahead and take too many liberties with a saying from Delegate Ware, I guess this is the anti-cognate of that bill. But what I would like to do is to walk you through the bill, give you a little bit of a summary. I do have our Secretary of Natural Resources here who'd like to speak, and that is before Assistant Secretary Navarro is here to answer any particular questions or get into the weeds on issues. I do know that y'all are extraordinarily aware of what the State Air Quality Control Board is doing and moving forward with regulations with respect to cap and trade on carbon emissions, as well as to link Virginia to the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. From what my understanding is that those regulations are moving forward, and those are anticipated to be adopted later on this year. What I will say is that moving forward with those regulations only makes this particular bill all that much more important, because without this bill, it does not give the General Assembly an opportunity to determine where those revenues that are generated from RGGI are going to go. And so if we do nothing and that regulation moves forward, the net impact is that those proceeds go back to the seller's shareholders rather than back to the people of Virginia. So I want to make sure that we as a General Assembly are able to prioritize where those revenues are supposed to go. Mr. Chairman, walking through the bill, first of all is Section B. And so what that does very simply is codify the Air Board regulatory process, and that also provides that those regulations will comply with the RGGI rule model. I did want to say a couple things about RGGI, because I think people have different perceptions about it, and I want to kind of make clear why this is a good approach for Virginia. And so first of all, it is voluntary. It's a voluntary consortium. Consists of 9 states right now. Actually, New Jersey just expressed that they're going to be getting back into it, so that's 10. And it does use a market-based approach with respect to setting prices for pollutant allowances that are sold at auction. So that has 2 benefits for Virginia. So number one, we're making sure that we're maximizing our efficiencies, because we are using those market forces, or as Mr. Massey said, we're using Mr. Market out there. But the other thing is that it provides a much larger market for Virginia in which to trade from. That said, Reggie is also very flexible, and so I think one of the things that is important to mention about Reggie is if you are a power provider and that you think that you can make those reductions cheaper by investing in solar, cheaper by investing in wind, without buying credits, you don't have to buy those credits. So you can go ahead and make those investments how you see fit and to maximize what you're doing. The other thing that I wanted to mention is with respect to costs, because I think you'll hear a lot of stuff back and forth on costs. I'm very sensitive about those costs, not just in my area, but all areas. And I think there's two pieces of information that I wanted to point out. And so one is a study that was done by the analysis group, and it looked at what happens to Virginia's rates if you join Reggie versus non-Reggie between 2020 and 2031. And if you look at all of our categories, all of our sectors, the difference between the two is less than 1%. And so I think that's pretty incredible. The other thing, though, is that we talk a lot about rates. And really, when you think about it, from the average homeowner, when you think about it from the perspective of the average industry or commercial property, they're not looking just at the rates. They're looking at what is it that they're paying out of their pocket at the end of every month. And when you look at Virginia compared to the other 9 Reggie states, and these are Department of Energy statistics, there are actually 7 Reggie states where the average homeowner pays less than what we do in Virginia. So you're thinking, well, how is that possible? Well, that's because of Reggie, you can funnel that money and plow it back into energy efficiency. And so that's the beauty of it, is that you're allowing homeowners to be able to actually save money as a result of those energy efficiency measures. Moving on to Section C, and so this is really kind of the heart of what we're trying to do here, and that again is just putting our fingerprints, our priorities in terms of how that money is used. And this is $200 million per year, and so that's a lot of money. And so the first one is up to 35% being credited to the Virginia Shoreline Resiliency Fund. I don't think it's lost on any of you that Virginia is particularly prone to this. I was just up in Agriculture Subcommittee number 3, where we had a half-hour debate about how we help some of these coastal property owners go ahead and deal with the issue of rising sea level. 30% going to the Virginia Saves program for energy efficiency. Again, making sure that those people who live in older, drafty houses, that you can get the weatherization programs to save you money. 17% to be directed to renewable energy programs. 10% to be directed to provide economic development and workforce development in southwestern Virginia. And so that's $20 million of stable revenue each year that we could be used to make those critical investments. And then the new thing here is that up to 5% can be used for agricultural B&P cost share programs. And so something I sat on over the summer with a lot of my colleagues was how do we stabilize funding for our agricultural B&P cost share program to both save farmers money but also protect our water resources. And we're really struggling with respect to providing support for both the Ag B&P cost share program but also operational support for our soil and water conservation districts. And so this is real money that would go to that. Finally, you have sections D and E, and these are new sections that were based on concerns expressed by Dominion. I think they're genuine concerns. I think these go a long way to solving those, and that is the concern about making sure that electricity providers don't simply move outside the state and you cause leakage in the system, again, so you're not actually solving your problem. And so Section D provides that at least 50% of the reduction in emissions has to be done through wind and solar, so that's a direct incentive that you're to do those here locally. And then Section E makes sure that customers with the ability to competitively shop because they consume more than 5 megawatts can't bypass what a utility would pay under Reggie. So in closing, Mr. Chairman, let me wrap with this. I think that Dominion has said for a number of years that it's anticipated a cap and trade program, whether that is at the state level, whether that's at the federal level. What they desperately crave is to have some stability in that process. And Mr. Chairman, I would say that this bill provides that stability while also reducing carbon emissions and at the same time providing much needed revenue to mitigate the impacts of sea level rise, grow our energy sector, expand weatherization programs, and provide economic development assistance. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I very much appreciate your time and your attention to this issue.
Thank you, Delegate Wilbur. Any members of the committee have any questions? Delegate Warren.
This is probably not for the patron, but he mentioned one of the utilities, Massachusetts, will cut off the details, but I don't know if any utilities have anything to say or statements.
I suspect they do. Anyone wish to speak in favor of the bill? In favor and opposition, you can go ahead and come on up and line up.
Chairman Quinn, members of the committee, Matt Strickler, Secretary of Natural Resources. I won't bore you with a lot of the details. Doug Bull did a great job of covering most of the ground that we covered earlier when we spoke to the full committee. I'll just say that this legislation is a big priority for Governor Northam. We appreciate Delegate Bull being the lead patron and also Delegate Helsel for being a lead patron.
Thank you. Delegate Raines?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question. On lines 26 through 29, and it says that the MOU was signed between states dating back December 20th to 2005. So is this something that we're just beginning to push hard and implement in the Commonwealth?
So, thank you for the question, and Angela Barr, my deputy secretary, can help me if I get out of line here. You're correct in that the Reggie Compact has been around for a number of years. Virginia is now making a push to join that compact. The regulatory path that we discussed earlier today, or regulation, would be a way for us to link to that compact and get carbon reductions as kind of the partner to the Reggie states. The legislation that Delegate Bull has would be a way for us to join fully and be a full Reggie state. Does that answer your question?
And I like the background.
Yeah, you have back.
We'll change that.
That's good. Thank you. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee, my name is Kevin Maurer. I'm with the Virginia Catholic Conference. We support this bill. We want Virginia to be a nationwide leader in the coming energy transition, and especially we want to make sure that the funds raised through these regulations are used to protect our vulnerable populations on the coast.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Bob Shibby, representing Sierra Club. You may be surprised to know that there are a lot of full red-blooded capitalists in the Sierra Club. I'm one of them. I have a 30-year career in the private sector, and I love market-based solutions. The only way we can attack and solve this type of problem of this magnitude is through market-based solutions. And just doing the ED11 steps that you all know about won't quite get us there. We need the market, we need the trading, and we need the money flowing as the bill dictates to make it all work. So I urge you to support the bill.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Delegate Raines?
So what steps? The what?
The Executive Directive 11 steps, which are another way to deal with carbon reduction. This is the market-based solution I think really makes those types of steps work.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Harrison Wallace with the Chesapeake Climate Action Network. I know I spoke this earlier, but I think it's in the full committee, but I think it's worth repeating that since Reggie's inception, emissions in states have fell 2 times greater than non-Reggie states, which is great for public health, and the state's economies have grown 3% more than non-Reggie states. And that's through that investment that the delegate was eloquently talking about earlier. And also from living in Norfolk for 3 years, I've seen the dangers that come from sea level rise and flooding. Right now there's no current solution that involves funding to fix that. We've studied it, we've done everything we can, but now is the moment to take action and have some reliable funding to fix an issue that will hurt our military bases and 1.6 million Virginians.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Vanessa Lockwood with the Virginia League of Conservation Voters, thank you for taking the time tonight to talk about this bill and hear from us. We support this bill and we support the allowance revenue coming back to Virginia to address our priorities.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, committee members, Carla Loeb with Sephora Solar. We are the largest residential solar installer in the state of Virginia, employing over 100 people. We have 1,200 customers throughout the state. We support this bill. We believe that it will incite market transformation with a market-based solution rather than mandates.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Aaron Sykes, Solar United Neighbors. We are a solar nonprofit, but we're not an environmental group per se. So our support actually comes from some of our more conservative or our non-traditional resiliency and solar in affected communities such as Hampton Roads area, as well as Southwest Virginia. I believe 10% of the funds will be directed to workforce development over there. So we've received some very strong support, albeit not for the environmental reasons, so we support it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello again, greetings, Chairman, Subcommittee members. My name is John Williams. I'm the Policy Director in the Virginia Majority. We are a civic engagement organization. We work with communities across the Commonwealth. I'm thankful for the opportunity to share. While we hope each of you will vote in favor of the Virginia Alternative Energy and Coastal Protection Act, flooding and lack of energy efficiency are two environmental concerns that come up repeatedly in our work with Virginians. When it floods in Hampton Roads, some of our members are trapped without vehicles or public transportation, which means that they are unable to access vital needs like medical services. Low-income Virginians, as someone already said, face high energy burdens, meaning that an outsized portion of their income goes towards energy bills. We've heard many groups, many elected officials share great ideas to address these concerns, but what we haven't heard is many great funding solutions. This bill is one of very few actual funding solutions that we've seen. As you know, Virginia joining RGGI is a market-based approach that will unlock critical funds towards statewide flood and resilience efforts, statewide energy efficiency programs, and other public benefits. As you also know, this bill asks that the General Assembly participate in the appropriations process for revenue and how that is spent. Virginia needs more than great ideas. Great ideas are nice, but we need legitimate ways to actually fund efforts. We need our elected representatives of the people to create funding solutions. The sustainability of our great state depends on it. As a win-win solution, we actually support this bill.
Thank you. Anyone wish to speak in opposition? Come on up.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Ryan Dunn with the Virginia Chamber of Commerce. We oppose joining RGGI in all facets. And it doesn't take long for you to look at some of the reasons why. I've heard that the state's economies in these RGGI states, which include Connecticut, Delaware, Maine, Maryland, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, New York, Rhode Island, and Vermont. There aren't many times when Virginia is competing for the same group of among those for economic development. We're in a class well above that group. And I think this would bring us down to that level. If you look at the rates in RGGI states, the rate of the 9 RGGI states in 2016 is an amazing 41% higher rate than it is in the national average. 41%. Virginia is 11% cheaper than the national average. Therefore, we're about going 50% higher should we go down this route. At the end of the day, I'm not sure that the section D of the substitute language is going to address one of the real issues that you'll see, which is the leakage of third party. Simply put, the energy in West Virginia and the energy in North Carolina will be cheaper, and even with the 50% reg, there will still be an opportunity to import energy into the Commonwealth. Simply put, I think this will take us in the wrong direction for our economic competitiveness in Virginia. We do things well, we do it the Virginia way, and I think we've been moving the ball forward in a responsible manner, and we'd ask you to oppose this legislation.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Clark Lewis, Troutman Sanders representing the Virginia Coal and Energy Alliance. We likewise stand in opposition to this bill to the extent it restricts coal production and use. As you all know, Southwest Virginia, the coal industry is of great importance, not only to Southwest Virginia, but the region and Virginia's economy. And for these reasons, we ask that you oppose the bill. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Brett Massey, Virginia Manufacturers Association. I want to point out just a couple of pieces of information I think are important. Many of you have already received our manufacturing competitiveness index. We have gone out and looked at where Virginia ranks against all 50 states in greenhouse gas emissions per capita per metric ton. What you'll find is Virginia is really not that far behind. I mean, we're number 13 in the United States right now as far as on the good side. We've beat a couple of the RGGI states, so that's number one. Number two, from our point of view, we're in the middle of a regulatory process. The administration has made a unilateral decision to pursue regulation through the State Air Board. We're right in the middle of that public comment process. We don't exactly know What will come back from that, it may be a recommendation, it may be a Virginia-based carbon regulation, we don't know. But we're in the middle of that process, and that is a process that I think will take throughout the rest of the year. So presupposing joining RGGI, I don't know that we're quite there yet as an industry. The next thing that I do want to point out, and I've been up here a while, I've heard all kinds of reasons for RGGI. I've heard it's to reduce carbon. I've heard it's to produce money for resiliency. I've heard it's to produce money for green energy. I've heard it's to produce money for energy efficiency. I'm not sure how much money we're talking about, but from our point of view, it's $200 million as a tax on energy. How you spend it is the legislature's choice, of course, but I would just suggest that if the General Assembly did not act on this bill or Poindexter's bill, if the administration and the regulatory process goes forward as is, we understand from the SEC that any auction funds that come back would actually flow back to the ratepayer. So you have a lot of choices to make over the next 8 to 10 months as we develop the draft regulation and the final regulation that I think will inform your decision about how to pursue this issue and others. We just ask that you take a little bit more time.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Matt Wells on behalf of West Rock, and also on behalf of the Virginia Forestry Association, and in the interest of time, Virginia Loggers Association and the Virginia Forest Products Association. West Rock has been a participant in the ED11 regulatory process, and we certainly appreciate the administration's continued dialogue and engagement on that. I wanted to speak very narrowly again to the issue of biomass. We believe that biomass should be carbon neutral biomass should be a part of any carbon regime going forward. Preliminary guidance by the EPA during the Clean Power Plan proposal was clear that forest residual biomass and manufacturing byproducts are carbon neutral, and international accounting protocols for carbon dioxide recognize the functional carbon neutrality of biomass while forest stocks are stable or increasing. We understand that this is likely to be a much broader discussion that unfolds over the next days and weeks, and we would just encourage the committee that as this discussion moves forward, that you consider this issue as of extreme importance to the state's third largest economic sector. Thank you.
Thank you. Elliot Bourne.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I see, oh, there he is, never mind. I was gonna make sure that we heard.
Mr. Chairman, I was actually going to ask if I could answer Warren's question.
Yes.
I would respectfully refer to Brett's comments. I would just say that we're looking at the bill in tandem with regulation. I think we might reach an opposite conclusion from what the BMA just shared. In taking no position, what we're balancing is there's a bill that provides input in the way the bill provides versus a regulation which is really purely executive branch process. We have discussed with the administration some concerns, and the amendments that they've offered are helpful. And I'm mindful of the chairman's reference earlier to Jefferson Maxim might accept the amendments, and we're at sort of a middle ground on, they've accepted some amendments. Our concerns are to not have an incentive to purchase power from out of state or shut down in-state generation, rather to build new in-state renewable generation. We are in no position at this time, recognizing it's an evolving process. We are certainly sympathetic to a bill that would be in that posture, today of all days. But we are mindful that a bill offers opportunities for input that are different from how regulation does. So that's where we are.
Thank you. Doug Mola.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And again, I want to thank you for your time, and really appreciate you listening on what is a very, very complicated bill all the way around with respect to energy. But I think the one thing that I wanted to highlight here, and you heard it over and over again, is this is a market-based solution. And so I think that's very important. It's a way that we distinguish from all the other things that we're doing out there, is we are simply using the market in order to be able to generate revenue that can go towards some very important priorities for this General Assembly. It does so in a responsible way through a system that has been tried and tested that provides some stability to the market. I would love to think that we could generate $200 million to go towards workforce development, to go towards coastal resiliency, but budgets are tight. This is a way that we can be able to make that happen, and at the same time reduce carbon emissions. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Doug Kilgore.
And if you look at line 39, starting at 38, it says to the extent permitted by Article 10, Section 7 of the Constitution of Virginia. It's my understanding, and Frank can correct me if I'm wrong, but that says that money that comes into the Commonwealth has to go to the general fund and then be budgeted by the General Assembly, or budgeted through the process. Is that correct? And so by doing this, I guess what I'm saying is by putting this going straight to the department, it may be permitted, it may not be permitted.
Mr. Chairman, to the extent they're trying to get around the appropriations process, I mean, the language that you cited is an attempt, I guess, to say the bill would pass constitutional muster, because it's not saying that we're violating the Constitution. We're saying to the extent it allows.
Thank you. Anyone else? Committee operates by motion. Motion to report moved, properly seconded. All those wishing to vote, please vote in the electronic voting board. Clerk will close the roll. Motion to report fails 3-6.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Delegate Bulova. Delegate Simon.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you very much.
House Bill 1155.
That is correct.
Right ahead.
So this is another net metering bill. This is, I don't think it's a little different spin on it. This is a freedom bill. It's a bill of freedom to do with your property what you like. So what this bill does, seriously though, it would just clear up a couple of things that we think are ambiguous in the code regarding folks' ability to finance solar installations on their homes through the use of power purchase agreements. It removes a 1% cap on net meter facilities relative to utility sales. We think getting a 1% cap is artificially low and inhibiting folks from investing in solar installations on their property. Directs the SEC to establish a metering program for multiple metered folks that want to be able to sell their electricity back, and then also amends the Commonwealth's energy policy to include goals of encouraging distributed solar. We've heard a lot of bills about the benefits of all of that. But this one is different from the other ones we've heard. But this is really about those folks that want to put solar panels on their house. They want to use that to generate their electricity, and if they generate more than they use, they want to be able to sell it back to the grid. And then they want to be able to finance it. The key is how you pay for your solar panels. One way to, innovative way to pay for them is to put the solar panels up, and then rather than paying for those all at once, buy the electricity that the solar panels generate from the installer and the company that put them in, allow you to finance the plant. So in a nutshell, and again, you guys are all very familiar, I'm not going to teach this committee anything about what these issues are, but that is what the bill does. I think we've got some folks here who would like to speak to it.
Anyone wish to speak in favor of the bill or in opposition, you can come on up.
I'm Emmanuel Sierra Club. We support this bill for the reasons that we've discussed in some of the previous bills for customers. So thank you.
Mr. Chairman and members of the subcommittee, Rachel Smucker on behalf of Secure Futures, we support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Come on up.
Ron Garrison, Appalachian Power Company. A couple of points I'll make. One is removing the 1% cap. There's been some conversation about the 1% cap. When we implemented the net metering provisions in Virginia, we did it in a way, we give them full retail rate. It was to incentivize the program to kind of jumpstart and get things going. The reason for the 1% cap
Sam Brumberg with Virginia's Electric Cooperatives. We too are lovers of freedom, but we respectfully oppose the bill. We do agree that there are parts of the net metering statute that are ripe for reform. We want to do that as part of our comprehensive reform process, negotiations of which are ongoing. We seek only cost recovery on a not-for-profit basis. For those reasons, we oppose the bill.
Thank you. You.
Just for the folks that
Delegate Ramsey.
do they plan on meeting about this throughout the year?
But there's been reference to ransom earlier. The Rubin Group have been meeting for about 2 years now. I'm a bad colleague because I helped sort of think of the idea, but then my colleague Catherine Mon has attended the dozens of meetings each year that have been taking place. And if I may, Mr. Chairman, the reason there are so many net metering bills typically each year is it's a really good economic deal. You buy retail and you sell retail. You get full retail credit for your own energy. And so over time, there have been efforts to sort of expand what is your own energy, multiple meters, multiple facilities, because it's a really good economic deal. And the concern is, we heard a discussion earlier with regard to energy efficiency on non-participating customers. With solar, it's a pretty stark thing where if a certain number of customers are essentially buying, using the grid without cost, and I recognize there are those who will argue that there are studies that show the value of solar is so compelling that it essentially is more beneficial to the grid, and that you should have that policy. There's some would even argue you should not only allow folks to use the grid without cost, you should pay them extra. That's not where our economics are modeling, or I'll defer to the governmental stakeholders in the room if they have a different view. But the fundamental public policy is if you allow more customers to not pay for transmission and distribution, you are having then a smaller number of customers pay for those costs, and everybody involved is using the grid in order to make their business model work, whether you're net metering or not. For those reasons, it's a long-standing provision. It's nothing personal aimed at the delegate, certainly not aimed at freedom. The question is whether you should get paid full retail. It's an absolute right to sell up to 20 megawatts, actually. That's 160 acres of solar panels, substantially more than the size we're talking about, but you sell at market rates, not for retail. For those reasons, we oppose the bill.
Thank you. Delegate Kilgore.
Yeah, I would hope that the parties can get together over the next year and try to address this issue, because it seems like over the past 7 or 8 years, I've watched these bills come forward and we're going to get something going. So if we can try to work on that over the next year to try to get a net metering, try to get a plan going, I think this committee, and especially Subcommittee 3, would appreciate it.
That would be great. Delegate Simon.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Chairman, I agree, and I talk about fear. I don't mean to be too glib about it, but I have a problem going back, and this is very complicated stuff. We get it, and we've heard a lot from all the experts, but it's sort of hard to explain to my constituents why can't I just put solar panels on my roof? I want to do it. It's good for the earth. It's actually like I understand the tax on the grid. I build a little power plant for Dominion, right? We're building a bunch of little power plants on, and feeding into the grid. Isn't there some value in us providing the infrastructure there? So again, being able to explain to the constituent, and then their view is, the bureaucracy in Richmond, it stops me from just doing something common sense like putting a solar panel on my roof and being able to make that work. So I look forward to participating in the discussion, be able to have a better answer for my constituents when I go home.
Thank you, Delegate Simon. Committee operates by motion. Mr. Chairman.
Move to report. Second.
Motion to report, properly seconded.
Substitute motion, PBI.
Motion to PBI, properly seconded. Members wishing to vote, Mrs. O'Neill.
2 seconds there. I think you can put solar panels on the roof. It's just a question of what you can charge back for. So, anybody can put a solar panel on the roof now. There's no bureaucracy in Richmond prohibiting people from putting panels on the roof.
You can't finance it through a power purchase agreement, or they're having difficulty financing it that way. But you're right.
Clerk will close the roll. Bill passed by indefinitely 6-4.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Delegate Simon. Delegate Tran, come on up. You have House Bill 1060 and House Bill 1253. Net metering bills.
2 more, but I would like to say, Mr. Chairman, that I would
love to participate in the conversations that are happening with stakeholders and other partners. But as a freshman, I didn't have that opportunity, so here are my feelings. But I made it to the end, and so I won't keep you longer. As I've crossed out and said, I appreciate this opportunity to speak to you this afternoon and now this evening about HB 1060. You know, the 1% cap, as you've heard repeatedly tonight, is outdated, and I want to talk about kind of the business growth aspect. It really inhibits the growth of our solar energy sector. There are 23 solar manufacturers located in Virginia, and they're ready to go and grow their businesses. The 1% cap actually stalls the development of solar projects long before the limit's reached because it takes a long lead time to do the planning and the calculations about how much will be going onto the grid. So it could have that unintended effect. We want to make sure that Virginia is able to fully capitalize on this emerging industry, which can create upwards of 50,000 new jobs in our economy over the next 5 years. Across the United States, comparable states have seen vast benefits from an increased solar cap and have seen job growth as a result. In recent years, the solar industry has created 260,000 jobs, while other industries have seen a decline in job growth. The solar industry also hires workers 17% faster than the closest job-creating industry. So in context, our neighbors in West Virginia have a 3% cap, and in North Carolina, there is no cap. So they've actually taken some actionable steps legislatively that have removed barriers to solar and the renewable energies. There's also an increased demand in Virginia for the solar energy from people and homeowners and such, and it's really growing exponentially. Data gathered by the U.S. Energy Information Administration found that demand for net metered solar grew by an average of nearly 40% per year in Virginia between 2011 and 2016. I've heard stories from my constituents that want to participate in the net metering program and want to install solar panels on their homes, as well as from a dairy farmer interested in installing a solar panel on top of her new creamery that she's going to build. So you see there's a lot of interest across the Commonwealth, and we want to make sure that we're able to maximize our usage of renewable energy, and we need to remove this barrier that the 1% cap presents. We've learned that there are some electrical co-ops that are coming up on their 1%, and so those communities are going to have to deal with this issue too. Our existing infrastructure can handle this increased load. The manager of the electric grid that includes Virginia, the PJM interconnection, in 2011 found that our grid can handle 20% solar today or 30% combined solar and wind. In the net metering program in Virginia, to answer Delegate Hugo's question earlier, you're right that anybody can install solar panels on the roofs, but really the net metering program is one of the main and if only incentive for customers to use and install solar. So it should be expanded and not curbed with an artificial and arbitrary limit, and Virginians should have the freedom as consumers to determine the best source of energy for themselves. So in conversations, we have supporters from a variety of different stakeholder groups, and I don't know how many of them were able to make it this late evening, but they included the Sierra Club, the Virginia Catholic Conference, the Virginia Conservation Network, the Eco Cycling Group, and Fairfax County. So I hope that you'll be able to vote favorably.
Thank you. Members, have any questions? Does anyone, you've alluded to your support, does anyone in the audience have anything to add?
Ivy Main with the Sierra Club. Thank you, Delegate Tran. For the same reasons that we supported the other bills that would raise the cap, we support this one. I really thought it was a great suggestion to have some of the delegates working with these stakeholder groups. We have been asking for these bills for years, and it may be that what we need is some of you delegates in on the discussions, and maybe that would finally get us to where we need to go. So I hope that will happen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Kevin Bauer, Virginia Catholic Conference. I would only like to point out we do support the bill. 23 states currently have no cap at all on net metering. 9 other states have caps that are higher than ours. We believe we should just get rid of the cap and let the free market work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Christy Smith with the Virginia Conservation Network. First, thank you to the patron for this bill. And on behalf of our more than 100 network partners from across the Commonwealth, we urge your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone in opposition want to add anything?
Good evening, Sam Brumberg with Virginia's Electric Cooperatives. Had a great discussion with Delegate Tran and appreciate her leadership on this issue. We do have a fair amount of headroom as far as the co-ops are concerned within the cap yet. Generally speaking, we've got at least 0.5% left in almost all of the cooperative territories. I'm having a discussion with commission staff just tomorrow morning to try to gather some official data on the cap and share it as much as we can. I too am, I would like to see a free market in this area, but lifting the cap currently with the statutory regulatory regime we have in place would not achieve that result. Respectfully oppose the bill. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Captain Bond, Dominion Energy, we also respectfully oppose the bill. Patron. And we look forward to continuing the dialogue. And what we have is a basic math problem. The reason the net metering cap is put in place in Virginia, in part, is because Virginia is one of the few states that pairs net metering with some of the other programs that allow full retail reimbursement, whereas other states have that reimbursement occur at market rates. So in Virginia, that reimbursement takes place at 2 to 3 times market levels, and that's what the cap is meant to help alleviate in terms of the expansion of subsidy and payment for those electrons at above market rates. So some of the other states cited limit the, have fewer limits in terms of the amount of net metering, but they limit the amount of compensation per kilowatt hour. And that's certainly one of the things we'll talk about over the course of the next year. Thank you.
Thank you. Last word, go ahead.
I think you've heard it all
Okay,
tonight.
all right, thank you. Committee operates by motion. Motion to report, properly seconded. All those wishing to vote, please vote on the electronic voting board. Clerk will close the roll. House Bill 1060, motion to report fails 4-6. Delegate Tran, you have House Bill 1253.
Thank you, sir. So 1253 helps lift the current provisions that prevent localities from engaging in municipal renewable energy net metering projects. Municipal net metering offers an important tool for localities that want to lower their energy costs, save taxpayer dollars, and support local renewable energy installers. Currently, local governments are not allowed to install a renewable energy facility on one site for energy usage at another site. So this bill changes that. We would amend our current net metering law in the Commonwealth to allow a municipal electric utility customer with a grid-tied renewable facility, so somebody who's using the grid, to feed surplus energy onto the grid that offsets electricity that's used away at a different location at other times in other locations. So with this legislation, local governments, if they choose to do so, would be free to explore this opportunity and make decisions that make good economic sense for their communities. There's strong support from across the Commonwealth. We were able to talk to some local localities that were interested in having this flexibility. That includes Prince William County, the city of Charlottesville, the city of Virginia Beach, and then other supporters that we were Echo Cycling, Sierra Club, the League of Conservation Voters, and the Virginia Conservation Network. So hopefully I would urge you to support this bill that would allow locals the flexibility of choosing the best energy source for them and save taxpayer dollars. Thank you.
Thank you. Delegate Kilgore.
As I've stated, you heard earlier, we're going to try to look at this over the next year, and hopefully you can come and present your bills to that particular group. If that's the way they operate, I'm not sure exactly how they operate, but they were able to get some agreement on a lot of issues this year.
Thank you, sir.
Delegate Hugo. Yeah, Mr. Chairman and full committee chairman, I look forward to working with everybody on this net metering issue. In 2007, I put in the net metering bill and the re-regulation bill. So, we saw this thing early on. It's come a long way. Obviously, it needs to go farther. I look forward to working with the chairman as this goes forward, as we've done over the last decade or more.
Thank you. Do you have anyone who needs to add?
Ivy Main Sierra Club again. This bill actually, one of the reasons for it came from an issue in Fairfax County. People asked me from the county how to deal with a problem. They would like to put solar panels on a closed landfill. The landfill could hold about 3 megawatts worth of solar panels, but there's no electric load on a landfill. And so they would like to be able to use the electricity for nearby county buildings. And there currently is no way to do it. If you send the electricity across a public road, you're no longer using it on site, and so you can't legally do it in Virginia. This is like like Delegate Sullivan's schools thing. This is a way of using solar to help the taxpayers, to help the localities save money on their energy bills, and put solar in places that it makes the most sense to do it. And this, we do think that there's probably a lot of localities that could benefit from this, and that would be really good for the taxpayers overall. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Virginia League of Conservation Voters, we look forward to continuing the conversation as well and support this bill.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone want to speak in opposition? Roll up.
For the reasons previously stated, I respectfully oppose the bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Anything else to add, Delegate Tran?
No, thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Committee operates by motion. I think I heard a motion in there somewhere. I heard a move to report, and I think I heard a second. And then I hear a substitute motion. It's late. Passed by and definitely properly seconded. Members wishing to vote, please vote on the electronic voting board. Clerk will close the roll. House Bill 1253 passed by indefinitely 6-4. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Delegate Tran. I think our next to last bill, Delegate Reed. Come on up. House Bill 474.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Next to last bill, that's unusual. Usually mine is last, but you're last, okay. I believe that I have a substitution or an amendment that was prepared, and hopefully it has been handed out. It's to change some of the text in lines 29 through 31 as far as where the revenue would be disseminated.
Can we go ahead and move the substitute so we can get that in front of us? Motion to adopt the substitute moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye. All right, substitute is before us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The purpose behind the substitute is that, well, let me start over. The purpose behind this bill in general is that as you drive down the road and you look at, just start by looking at a clover leaf. Any particular clover leaf where we have two major intersections interacting, that particular clover leaf area represents about 2 acres of usable land. Now, I'm not talking about taking land where we have trees or we have wildflowers, but there are many of these cloverleaf areas and other parts of the right-of-way throughout the state where it's basically unused fallow land that we could look at the possibility of generating revenue from that area. And what gave me this idea is that as you think about how the federal government goes about actually getting additional revenue, when they decide that they need additional revenue, they will take and they will have an auction for basically selling airwaves, cellular things. We don't have the ability for something like that in Virginia, but we do have a lot of open land that is owned by the state or is managed by the state where we could lease this property out, generate revenue, and then actually allow a solar company to be able to put panels in those areas and generate revenue that could then flow into the transportation fund or the highway maintenance fund. And so that's the change here. The original intent of this was to actually have 75% of the money go to the localities, with 25% of it going to the general fund, so that we would actually be allowing any place where there are roads going throughout the state generating revenue for those localities. Having spoken with VDOT, there are issues concerning this because the roads that are produced using federal funds, the money needs to go into the Transportation Trust Fund or into the Highway Maintenance Fund. So the idea is basically free up these roads, kind of create a new type of economic opportunity within Virginia so that there's the opportunity to generate revenue that we've not had an opportunity to generate before. This is not a new tax on anyone. It is basically trying to create a new business opportunity in Virginia.
All right, thank you. Delegate Marshall.
Yeah, I was wondering if anybody from VDOT, any audience is going to speak. Please come forward. Thank you.
Go on up.
Good evening, my name is Robert Hofflicker, I represent the Virginia Department of Transportation, I'm the director of finance.
Thank you, sir. My concern is that what the patron talked about, the bill is putting solar panels in clovers. And I'm just worried about the danger of accidents that cars, the ice storms we just had in the last few weeks. What happens that if we put solar panels in the right-of-ways, as far as how do you protect those and how do you protect the traveling public? Is that a concern?
That could be a concern. It would be site specific for each location that would be looked at. There are other issues with this as well. VDOT looked at this back in 2012, 2013 in response to a bill from then Delegate Serval, and we had a report on that provided to the patron. And the long and short of it is that one state has done something similar to this, and that's Massachusetts. And their sort of experience with it was that they made a whopping $880 a year out of it.
$880.
So compared to the effort that it would take for staff to identify the locations and go through all the safety issues with each location stuff, we just don't see it as moving forward.
Follow-up question.
Delegate Marshall.
So, Mr. Chairman and I served on a committee that met last year about wireless, and we talked about VDOT leasing space to put an antenna in their right-of-way. We was told that VDOT would rent that space for $24,000 a year. If you rent two of them, you get a discount on the second one, and the second one's $12,000 a year. So I could see why, if Massachusetts renting it at a rate like that VDOT's renting, no wonder they make it $800.
Yes, sir.
That's rhetorical.
Thank you. So, Mr. Chairman, can I speak to that? One of the things that the report from 2012 did not include the fact, because I spoke to the gentleman from VDOT, it didn't include the fact that VDOT would actually save money by not having to do maintenance on those areas, because it would be included as part of the lease. The other thing, which they will admit to, is that this particular piece of legislation would actually require that the local utilities buy the power at the ongoing market rate, which again was not taken into account in the earlier legislation. So there are things that are different about this than it was in 2011 or 2012.
Thank you. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak for or against? Further questions from the committee?
We've worn everyone out.
You have anything else you'd like to add?
No, I have nothing else to say. Well, I do, other than the fact that I just want to say, I look at this as an opportunity of where can we actually generate additional revenue that has not existed before, doesn't result in a tax, and I hope would generate new business opportunities for Virginia as well. So I would appreciate your consideration.
No, I like your outside the box thinking. Committee operates by motion. Motion to report properly seconded. Members wishing to vote, please vote on the electronic voting board. Clerk will close the roll. Motion Motion to report fails 4-6. Final bill, Delegate Kilgore, House Bill 1252.
There's a substitute, Mr. Chairman.
We go ahead and adopt the substitute. Motion properly seconded. All those wishing to adopt the substitute, please signify by saying aye. Those opposed? The substitute is before us. Delegate Kilgore, whenever you're ready.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I know that recently, earlier this afternoon, we adopted, we sent up a bill where we approved 4,000 megawatts of solar power and found that to be in the public interest. What House Bill 1252 is a bill designed to help schools and nonprofits, primarily in Southwest Virginia. There's already a good pilot program in Dominion service territory, and there's a group that's working in Southwest Virginia, a group of nonprofit community action agencies, colleges, state agencies, planning district commissions, seeking to develop a renewable energy cluster down there in the 7 Coalfields County. And basically what this bill would do, Mr. Chairman, with the adoption of the substitute, would be able to help these tax exempt organizations use a 30% federal solar tax investment tax credit by entering into a third party public-private partnership PPA and allow some developer to come in or investor to receive the tax credit, pass the savings on to a nonprofit or a school. I think that this 30% federal solar tax credit is getting ready to go down from 30% to 26% for projects commencing in 2020 and 22% in 2021, and then it goes on further down from that. So what this bill does, it leaves existing Dominion alone, limits participation in APCO area Kentucky utilities to tax exempt organizations, and limits the maximum size to 1 megawatt, which is still a pretty good size, and but it also grandfathers all others existing TPAs and leaves them unaffected by this bill, because I did hear that they didn't want that, and it also doesn't apply to the electric co-ops. And I do have an electric co-op in my area too, but that's basically the bill. I think I have somebody here to speak. There you are, to speak for it.
Thank you, Delegate Kilgore. Does anyone have any questions of Delegate Kilgore at this point? All right, go right ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Adam Wells with Appalachian Voices. I drove here from Wise this morning. Appalachian Voices is a co-convener of the Solar Work Group of Southwest Virginia, which is a broad-based work group working to develop a solar industry in our Southwest Virginia. We are thankful to Delegate Kilgore for patronage HB 1252. The Solar Work Group emerged out of a regional economic forum hosted at the University of Virginia's College of Wise in 2016 that brought together economic development professionals from across the region working to diversify our economy. As Delegate Kilgore mentioned, the work group is comprised of local governments, agencies, K-12 school districts, institutions of higher learning, and other nonprofits. Late last year, the work group released a roadmap for solar development in Southwest Virginia, which laid out a strategy for developing a solar industry cluster in the region. The roadmap identified key commercial scale projects that would be in high visibility locations such as schools, hospitals, and other state-owned and locally owned buildings. It also proposed several policy recommendations. HB 1252 advances the power purchase agreement recommendation in the roadmap by expanding Virginia's power purchase agreement pilot program, and allows the tax exempt entities laid out in the roadmap to take advantage of the power purchase agreement. Just one example I'll share very quickly is in Dickinson County, Ridgeview High School, struggling school districts could save over $1.5 million over the guaranteed 25-year lifespan of the program, which would be significant savings for that school district. Members of the work group have been very supportive of this bill. I would think we appreciate Delegate Cole's leadership. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else who would like to speak in favor of the bill? Anyone who would like to, Delegate Cole?
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
I think inadvertently on line 21, it exempted KU, which shouldn't have been exempted, so that would have gutted my bill. Or most likely gutted my bill. So if I could, where it says on line 21 there, in other than a utility described in subsection G of 56-580, and I may be getting it wrong, Frank, I think that is KU. And if that was in there, I may have.
Delegate Gill, would you clarify for the audience who KU is?
Kentucky Utilities, which serves Wise County, a little bit of a part of Wise County, a little bit of Dixon County, and some of Lee County. I was trying to remember all the geographic areas that they do. So I just, if we move forward, if we move the bill forward, I want to make sure that I fix that.
So you want to fix that now?
Yeah, that'd be great. If somebody make a motion.
Okay.
Is the motion to strike the phrase other than the utility described in subsection G,
Right.
section 5680?
Right.
All right, that amendment has been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed? All right, the amendment's adopted.
I don't know if anybody is against the bill, but there may be.
Now that it's not gutted.
Now that it's not gutted,
Anyone in favor?
Ivy Mangus expands the ability of customers to do solar in Virginia. We support it.
Thank you. Anyone else in favor? Anyone in opposition? Motion has been properly moved and seconded. Members wishing to vote, vote on the electronic voting board. Everyone voted? Delegate Kilgore, you want to vote on your own bill? All right. House Bill 1252 reports 9-0. Seeing no further patrons.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. Delegate Marshall.
How many more bills do we have?
0.
Good.
Tonight. Seeing no further patrons in the audience, motion or the committee's adjourned.